The List by Patricia Forde, Chapter 16. Number 357. Remember, keep in mind, no forget. "How are you, master?" she said gently. He looked up at her, the old gray eyes unusually bright. With difficulty he spoke. "I have so much to tell you, so many things you should know. I promised your mother you would have nothing to do with politics. It had cost her so much already." His eyes had grown dull and his breathing more labored. Letta shook her head. "It's all right, master. Be calm now." The old man turned his head toward her, and even that little movement seemed to cost him greatly. She had to put her ear to his mouth to hear him. "John Noah is not what he thought. He wants to make us all wordless, Letta, permanently. We would never be able to communicate again. Never." A fit of coughing shook the old man's body, and he lay back on his pillow, defeated. "What will happen to us?" Letta asked. "Will we become extinct?" "Extinction is the saddest word," Benjamin said. "Noah told me that when I first met him." "Why did Noah hurt you, master? Why did he arrest you?" "He wanted to help me, save me." "Save you from what?" "You don't understand. In the old days, before the melting, no one would listen. No one. The politicians just talked and talked. They used words to keep the people in ignorance." "It's all right, master," Letta said, laying her hand on his arm. "Don't upset yourself." "What Noah wants to do is insane," he whispered. "I couldn't agree to it. I don't want to be one of the elite. I don't. What have I done, Letta? I trusted him." "Don't worry, master. It will all work out." She tried to make her voice soothing, but he was so weak she couldn't be sure he was hearing anything she said. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Don't drink the water. Remember that, child. Don't drink the water. Don't let anyone drink it." His hand fell away and he closed his eyes. Soon he was asleep, his labored breathing replacing the silence. Letta watched him, noticing the deep lines in his face, the gray in his hair. She stroked his cheek, talking softly to him, reassuring him, comforting him. Later, as she walked out of the house, feeling shocked and numb, "He's ill," she thought. "Why else would he talk the way he's talking? John Noah plans to make us wordless? Don't drink the water? It doesn't make any sense." "Letta!" Marlowe's voice cut across her thoughts. Letta watched him stride across the yard toward her. The air was heavy. She looked up and saw that the sky, too, seemed loaded, as if it would soon snow. Somewhere overhead a bird screeched, and Letta realized how quiet it was. A silence had fallen on the forest, broken only by the moaning of the wind. "There you are," Marlowe said, putting his arm around her. She shivered despite herself. "How is he?" "Weak," Letta said, more to herself than anyone else. "He thinks Noah plans to make us wordless. He keeps telling me not to drink the water." She looked up at Marlowe, trying to judge his reaction. Marlowe shrugged. "Let him rest. Talk to him again after he's slept." Letta nodded. The day passed slowly, with Benjamin lapsing in and out of consciousness. In the background, Letta was aware of Marlowe and Finn coming and going, talking in hushed tones. Edgware continued to dose him with her various concoctions, leaving little bottles beside the bed, mixing potions that filled the house with strange smells, but nothing seemed to help. "He be an old man," Edgware said to Letta. "You can nae expect too much. Old people get tired, you know. After a while, they nae care so much." "But he will get better," Letta pushed her. "Perhaps," Edgware said, but Letta didn't like what she saw in her eyes. As night fell like a thick blanket, Letta again went to sit with Benjamin. Edgware bandaged his hands again and left a noxious brew for him to drink when he woke. "I sleep now," she said to Letta. "I come to you in a few hours. Call me if you be jittered. The wolves might come close to the house. You'll hear them, but Finn lit the torches outside earlier. That will keep them at bay." "Thank you for everything," Letta said. "I still don't understand why you've done all this for us." The old woman sighed. "I can nae do much for your kind," she said, "but I tried to show them that there are people who can behave like humans where I meant to behave. Were meant to behave. I remember the old days. The human race made a lot of mistakes, but we did good things too. We had minds of our own. We made decisions. It wasn't all bad." Before Letta could say anything, the old woman turned and left the room. Letta went over and sat beside Benjamin. His breath was coming in soft little gasps, like the rabbits Letta had seen in the wheat fields as a child. Soft little puffs of air. Outside, she thought she could hear moaning. It could be wolves gathering, she thought, or maybe the wind. That night, Edgware had insisted Letta sleep for a few hours while she kept watch, and to her own surprise, Letta had slept. When she returned, she found Edgware nodding to the bed, by the bed, her chin bouncing gently on her chest. Letta had sent Edgeworth to her bed and resumed her vigil. The old man had been restless, but had not regained consciousness until he woke just before dawn. When he turned his head, Letta could see that he was barely able to open his eyes. "Master," she said, "you're awake." He squeezed her hand. "There are things I need to tell you, Letta. I wish I could pass this burden to someone else, someone older. But you are the wordsmith now." "What, Master? What should I know?" "John Noah called me to his house to make an offer. He offered me immunity from what he planned to do." A fit of coughing suddenly racked his body. Letta lifted her head and waited anxiously until it subsided. "It's all right, Master," she said. "You can tell me later. Rest now." He lay back on the pillow, and Letta could see a blue glow around his mouth. "No time," he said. "Let me finish." She stroked his hand. "Go on, then," she said. "John Noah plans to make the people wordless." "Wordless? What could he have in mind? A shorter list? No list?" "He's determined. He thinks man is still a liability." "Master?" Letta felt her heart pounding. He opened his eyes again. "Letta," he said, "you are the wordsmith now. For centuries, writers have stood between the rulers and the people. You have to stop him." Letta put her hand on his cheek. "I will, Master," she said, tears rolling down her face. "I will. They loved you very much, you know, your parents. They would never be away if they could help it." "I know that, Master," she said. He tightened his grip on her hand. "In my study, in the bottom drawer, is a package for you, Letta. Do not open it until all this is over. Then, if there is a future, if you manage to stop him, open it then." "But what is it, Master? Why do—" "No questions, child. Just remember, the birds still fly south. Remember that, child." Letta had no idea what he meant. Was he delirious again? His breathing got more labored. He gripped her hand. "You have been like a daughter to me, Letta," he said. "You can't let Noah do this to us." Letta tried to speak, but her throat was too tight, tears rolling into her mouth and down her neck. Around the room, the fireflies were gathering. Words she couldn't say dancing around her head. Love, heart, warmth. "Master," she managed to say, but he hushed her, and with the last bit of his strength, pulled her to him. She put her head on his chest. She could just hear the faint beat of his heart and feel his hand on her hair. "No need," he said, "no need for words." She closed her eyes, listening to him breathe, and a calmness descended. Outside, she heard a lone bird greet the day, its song bright and full of hope. The sun shone weakly through the window and warmed her neck. Benjamin exhaled one long breath, a breath full of resignation. Letta waited for him to inhale, but there was only the sound of her own heart in her ears. And then she knew he was gone. She had stayed with him for as long as she could. She didn't wake the others, wanting these last few hours alone with him. Her mind was racing with all he had told her, but her heart was numb. She tried to remember the happy times when they had spent together, things he had told her, but she couldn't concentrate. He was depending on her, and she would not let him down. She paced the floor, trying to assemble the facts as she knew them. Noah planned to make the people wordless. He had offered to save Benjamin, but Benjamin had refused his offer. Noah had murdered him. That was all she knew. The immensity of her promise hit her. How could she stop Noah? She had no idea what it was he had planned to do. Images of the wordless haunted her. Edgware came to her as the first flurries of snow filled the window. She looked at the old man, then took Letta in her arms. Letta was glad to feel the warmth of the older woman, but she still couldn't feel anything emotionally. Within minutes, Finn and Marlowe joined them. They sat together around the bed while Edgware chanted old verses that she said would shelter his fleeing spirit. Letta had never heard anything like it. "Hallowed, hallowed be thy name, you shall nae want, for thou be great. As you be in your beginning, be now, and ever shall be. Hallowed, hallowed, hallowed." Then, with the help of Marlowe and Finn, she wrapped Benjamin's body in a white linen sheet. At midday, they buried him behind the cottage as snow fell on Letta's hair and rested on her upturned face. The others left her alone, then to say her last goodbyes. Anger consumed her, hot, fierce anger, roaring inside her so her ears rang and her stomach churned. She looked back into the forest, but there was nothing to see apart from the snow, a white screen between her and the rest of the world. Benjamin. She would never see him again, never hear his voice, never hold his warm hand. His soft, reassuring presence in her life was gone forever, like a clock that had stopped ticking. Marlowe's voice woke her from her reverie. "There you are," he said. "I was worried." Of course he was worried. She was in the forest, alone. How quickly she had grown used to her new surroundings, lulled into a mindless security in a matter of days. "I'm sorry," she said. "I needed time to think." He offered her his hand, and she took it with some reluctance. "I talked to Finn," Marlowe said. "You can live with us if you want to. Would you like that?" She could see the concern in his beautiful eyes and the blue-gray shining in the white light. She hesitated. "Thank you," she said. "I would love to go live with you, but—" He frowned. "But I have to go back, Marlowe. There are things I have to do." As soon as the words were spoken, she realized she had made her decision. She had to try to do what Benjamin had asked of her. "You should know something," Marlowe spoke slowly. "We are planning a revolution. Finn has already recruited people from Ark, from Tin Town. It's only a matter of time before we overthrow Noah. You could be part of that." "There isn't time," Letta said. "We know he plans to make us wordless. We need to know how he's going to do it." "I don't understand," Marlowe said. "I hope I can be the wordsmith. I think that it is important to Noah." Marlowe's face fell. "You will go back and work for him, even now, after all that has happened." Letta smiled. "I will go back and work against him, Marlowe. That's different." Finn, however, was not as easy to persuade. They sat around Edgeware's table and talked late into the night. Edgeware said little, but Letta could see she listened to every word. Finn continued to push for Letta to come and stay with them. "You are too young to take Noah on all alone, Letta," he said finally, and Letta could see that he was coming to the end of his patience. "In time we can overcome him. We already have the makings of an army." "We don't have time," Letta said. "I am the wordsmith. I can get Noah to trust me, like he trusted Benjamin. I can find out what he plans to do, and then we can stop him." "If he hasn't killed you by then," Finn said. There was silence for a second as those words hit home. Then Edgeware spoke. "I think Letta be right," she said. Everyone stared at her. The old woman took up her cup and sipped from it. You will nay stop him from the outside. He be too clever and too well protected. If Letta gain his confidence, happen it be easier to defeat him." "And what if he realizes what she's up to?" Finn's eyes were hard as he glared at the old woman. Edgeware didn't flinch. "Then he be killing her and we all be wordless. If she nay does do it, she live on, but mankind as we know it be destroyed." She put her cup down. No one spoke. The stark reality of Edgeware's words brooked no argument. There was no going back now. Letta only hoped that she could do what was required of her. "You will have us behind you at all times," Finn said, as though reading her mind. "Whatever we can do will be done. We need to keep in touch to let us know what is happening." Letta nodded. "Of course," she said. "What about you, Edgeware?" Finn said. "Can we persuade you to come and live with us?" The old woman shook her head. "Whatever days be left to me, I will see out here in the forest," she said. "I am having no need of the company of men." "Have you no family?" Letta asked quietly. The old woman shook her head. "I be having a son once," she said, playing with the handle of her cup. "What happened?" Letta said, realizing she was straying into territory that old people didn't like. Edgeware looked up at her, her eyes clear and bright. "Noah made him wordless," she said. Letta felt as though the breath had been knocked out of her. "Wordless?" she said, thinking of the people she had seen in Tin Town. "Why do you say Noah made him wordless?" Finn asked. "Because he did," she answered him, and then looked down at her cup. "How?" Letta asked, trying to make sense of the shifting sands. Edgeware laughed, a mirthless sound. "He cut out his tongue." She had spoken so softly that Letta thought at first she had misheard, but one look at Marlowe's face and she knew there was no mistake. "He cut out his tongue." "Why?" Letta had to force the word out. Edgeware shrugged. "Who be knowing that?" she said. "It be a time before list, an experiment done in secret. He kidnapped the children. It be his first attempt to control words, but it be too complex. Many of the chosen ones bled to death. My Thomas didn't. He survived. His body did, but his spirit be dead from that day. He hanged his own self one morning. He be 17. Her words hung in the stale air of the little room for a moment. Letta felt she could almost touch them. "How did you find out? About Noah, I mean," she said. Edgeware was silent for a minute, but then she started to speak again. "A couple months after they be taken, the children who didn't die arrived back. They walked out of the forest. None of them could communicate, or they be too afraid to. My Thomas could write. Noah didn't know that. I took him home and got the story from him. They telling them their families be killed if they tell anyone. But Thomas and I be close in heart always. He tells me everything." "Was that when you went to live in the forest?" Finn asked the question quietly, but Letta could hear the steel in his voice. The old woman nodded. "I couldn't stay here. I took Thomas and everything we owned and walked back into the forest. I thought I would survive, but somehow I did. But Thomas didn't, Marlowe said. Edgeworth shook her head. No, she said, he died here, and he'd be buried here. The words were simply spoken, but Letta knew it explained why Edgeworth stayed. She didn't want to abandon him. Letta was reluctant to leave the old woman and Benjamin. It was strange to her that she took comfort in him lying under the forest floor. It seemed like a better place than back in Ark, a safer place. The old woman hugged her before she left. Go safely, she said. Thank you for everything you did for me and for Benjamin, Letta replied. I hope someday that I will be able to repay you. If you be able to stop Noah, you will more than repay me, Edgeworth said before letting her go. Almost before she knew it, Letta was once more following Finn through the dense forest, listening to Marlowe's steady steps following her. The snow had stopped falling, but had left a deep carpet underfoot. The wetness soaked Letta's feet, leaving her feeling cold all the time. She barely noticed, though. Her mind was too preoccupied by the future and what she might do and where it would lead her. By the time she saw the south gate of Ark loom out of the mist, she knew she had the bones of a plan. The water tower was deserted. He stood on the narrow walkway between the tanks. He rehearsed what he would do. The Green Warriors had taught him all he knew about the chemical. He was almost ready. He walked through it in his mind until he was certain he hadn't forgotten anything. Then he climbed down the stairs, one foot after the other, gripping the rusty banister. His hands slippery with sweat. How many to keep? The Green Warriors, Len, the Chief Gaver, Amelia, and a handful of craftsmen. That should be enough. The wordsmith? Letta was a sweet girl, and it made his heart heavy to think of losing her, but no, they would have no need for a wordsmith, he was confident. Benjamin had removed most of the words that were out there, though perhaps Amelia would want to keep her. That was something he would discuss with her. He made a mental note to destroy his own library. There would be time enough to destroy what remained in the wordsmith's shop when it was all over. By then, words would be of no use and of no interest. Before the melting, the wordless had been aggressive at first, but soon became docile and lost the will to live. He would leave that to nature. There was only so much he could control.